Louise Haigh.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, for granting today's urgent question, and can I thank the Home Secretary for making time to respond to the question. Today, the House is united in grief and shock at the tragic toll of the past couple of weeks, adding to the hundreds of children murdered in our communities over the last year. In Birmingham, over the space of just 12 days, 3 teenage boys have lost their lives. Sadali Mohammed and Abdullah Mohammed, both 16 years old. Student Hazrat Umar, 18 years old. On Friday, Jodie Chesney killed in a knife attack in an East London park as she played music with her friends. She was 17. Youssef Maki, stabbed to death in a village near Altrincham. He was 17. It adds to a 93% rise in the number of young people being stabbed since 2012. These senseless murders are a national tragedy which must cause us to reflect on how the promise that these young boys and girls represent could so senselessly be extinguished. But it must also be a cause for action. One life lost in an act of violence is one too many. One mother who will never see her son or daughter again is one too many. It is a national crisis, and it requires national leadership from the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary to provide whatever support is necessary to help the police investigate and fight this outbreak, and to provide communities and services with whatever resources are necessary to protect our increasingly vulnerable young people. So can I put the following questions to the Home Secretary? Back in 2000, the then Prime Minister Tony Blair took the decision to activate the Emergency Cobra Committee and set a target for bringing the violent street crime that had peaked then under control. We must see similar leadership today from our Prime Minister. So will she step up and convene a crisis summit backed with emergency funding? Can the Home Secretary confirm that this is going to take this week, and if not, why not? And underpinning the cross-government effort that he mentioned has to be a public health approach to tackle the root causes of violence. This is something we thought the government favoured too, encompassing looking at youth services, school exclusions, housing, social services, mental health and health as a whole. It was therefore shocking to hear the comments from the Health Secretary this morning on LBC when he didn't appear to know that this was the approach adopted by his own government, and criticised the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, for using public health terminology. So can the Home Secretary confirm if the public health approach to tackling knife crime has been discussed at Cabinet? What action has been agreed as a result of this cross-governmental approach, and how are the Department of Health supporting it? He's further committed to legislation to underpin that public health approach. When exactly will that be brought forward? Finally, Mr Speaker, we cannot pretend the cuts to policing have not made our country less safe. Sadly, the Prime Minister and other members of her Cabinet continue to deny this crucial link. In the coming weeks, police will have the heavy responsibility of running investigations into young lives lost and bringing perpetrators to justice. The funding settlement that we voted on last month is completely inadequate to allow them to do this, especially for those forces hardest hit by violent crime. So will he urgently review the funding settlement to ensure that those forces who have seen the biggest increases in violent crime are given whatever they need to fight this outbreak? Mr Speaker, this country is facing a crisis. It is time for leadership from our Prime Minister and our Home Secretary, for clear action and a united vision from all arms of government, and for emergency funding for the police and prevention programmes to keep our children safe. Warm words are no longer enough.
Well done. Mr Speaker, can I thank the Honourable Lady for her questions? And she started quite correctly talking about how this House is united in its grief with all the deaths that we've seen, particularly of young people, not just in recent days, but if we look back over the last number of years, and how we've seen an increase in these tragic crimes, how it's dividing communities and causing so much pain for so many people. She asked me 3 questions, Mr Speaker. First of all, this is a huge priority across government, and that is why almost a year ago the government set out a serious violence strategy with over 60 actions that are taking place that not just involve government but other public agencies and bodies, and to help implement those actions we also set up a serious violence task force, which is a cross-party task force which includes people like the Mayor of London, for example, as well, so we can make sure that we're working well not just within central government but across public bodies. Which brings me to the second point the Honourable Lady raised, which is the public health approach, which is something I announced towards the end of last year, and that again was through listening to experience from both other parts of the UK, from other countries as well, who have also seen a similar rise in serious violence, and I think we should learn from wherever we can, and I think it is important to have such an approach which requires all government departments, all agencies of government to treat serious violence as the way we would treat, for example, a disease, to prioritise it and to make it a statutory duty. And that's why I welcome the support by honourable members across the House for this. And I said that it will require, because of statutory duty, it will therefore require legislation, which begins with a consultation which is about to take place very shortly. And then thirdly, the honourable lady asked about funding and resources. As I've mentioned, Mr. Speaker, I have recognised, I've long recognised that in tackling serious violence, there's no one single cause, but having the right amount of resources is vitally important, and that's why we set out in this House earlier this year an increase of up to £970 million to policing, almost double the increase of the year before, which is the largest increase since 2010, which will lead to significant rise in the capabilities, including the number of officers. And alongside that, finally, Mr. Speaker, we have also announced a record allocation to early intervention, especially early intervention helping young people, with the Youth Endowment Fund, which is a £200 million fund, which is the biggest such investment any government has ever made.